intro before we really dive in here. Mike Field started his professional career back in the 90s during the dot-com boom. If anybody here remembers that like I do. He spent 13 years as a software engineer, but when his son was diagnosed on the autism spectrum, everything changed. Mike used a strengths-based approach called DIR Floortime to support his son. Inspired by what he learned from his son, Mike went back to school to get an MS in Rehab Counseling from Georgia State University in 2009. As a counselor in private practice, Mike specializes in working with families and individuals with disabilities, primarily ASD or Autism Spectrum Disorder, where praxis and anxiety are frequent challenges. He uses play and joyful experiences to promote growth and healing. Most recently, Mike is using the intentional application of cooperative board games and RPGs to create opportunities for development. So all of that is really good information. It's super happy to have you here to talk about all this stuff. Stickerless fluff butt. Yes, my cat earlier got a sticker stuck on his stomach. This big sticker. It was like this big, just on his stomach. It was horrible.
He wants to show it off.
Well, we had to pull it off, which he wasn't too thrilled with. Let me see if I can get him to go away.
I'm personally pretty protective of what little hair I have, so I can empathize and having sticker removal.
Yeah, he has got some fantastic hair. We have 2 short hairs and 1 long hair cat, and he's the hairy one. Okay, so that was a quick little introduction, and again, thank you for being here. So with that being said, chat, we do have a queue set up. So if you have questions, oh, I lied. Just kidding. Okay, now we have a queue set up. If you have any questions as we're going along, please feel free to enter those into the queue with !Q, followed by your question. That'll enter it in, and we can just answer it as we go.
Sounds good.
So,
where do we start?
Yeah, you said you were inspired by what you learned from your son, who was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. Was there any one moment where you had kind of a eureka moment and thought, I want to do this as a career to help other people?
Wow, one moment. There's so many. When my son was diagnosed, I was blessed to have the opportunity to start working from home. I was a software engineer working for a company in Wichita. And so any therapist that came over to the house, I could say, I'll be right back. I got to run upstairs and check out what's going on. And I really wanted to be involved. When Brendan was first diagnosed, the doctor said, he has autism. He's going to have lifelong limitations. And I thought, well, I'll never dunk a basketball, but so what? What kind of limitations are you talking about?
I mean, same.
Yeah. And he said, I don't know. I'm like, well, what good is that? Because, at that point I was a scientist, software and, logic and programming. I want data, right? But they didn't have anything. So through coincidental family connections, met up with another therapist, and she said, I can't tell you what your son's going to do, but I can't tell you what he's not going to do either. And that shift alone from fear to hope and potential was really the start of it. But I can remember, I guess one of many stories in particular, we were taking him to swim lessons. Mm-hmm. Loved being in the water, getting that extra weight, that extra pressure on your body, is really calming and soothing. And that's why my wife has a membership. She goes and gets a massage every month because that deep pressure is calming and soothing for.
Yeah.
But coming out of the pool and leaving, I remember that my son got really upset and he was crying. And back then we lived kind of out in the boonies, so we're driving back home. There's nobody on the roads, and I don't remember why it started. He was upset, so I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna go this way, and I turned and started driving off into a field. And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, not this way? He's, no. So I put the car in reverse and just started driving backwards. I'm pulled out on the road. I'm going backwards. again, we're kind of out in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And he, thought that was a little silly. And he's like, wait a second, what's going on? I'm like, well, I'm just going home, not this way. What should I do? And just being silly, that affective connection, helping him feel safe and connected in what was otherwise, and I can't remember what happened, but just feeling safe and connected like that
Mm-hmm.
changed everything for both of us. It was, I was stressed, he was upset, and then we got into this nice rhythm where we were together, connected, we relaxed, we were happy. And that was one of many, many experiences like that where it's, that he's not broken, don't
Mm-hmm.
need to be changed or fixed. How can we connect? How can we build on the things he likes, the things he's good at, the things I like and that I'm good at? Because there's lots that I really suck at too. Um, and that's kind of been the theme in the family too. When my son, he's 21 now, and I'll ask him, "Hey, can you help me with this?" And he's like, "Well, why can't you do it?" And I'm like, my brain really sucks at that. He's got a great memory, and anytime I need to know something, if it's a detail that somebody has said near him, he knows it. So I'm like, "Hey, what was that thing?" And he's like, I'm like, "No, my brain really sucks at that. I don't know." I'm like, my brain is good at stuff like being silly and improv and imagination and that kind of stuff. But as evidenced by my late arrival tonight, uh, organization, not something I'm good at. Um, my wife is a NICU nurse, and so we joke that if you need somebody who's so organized that it can be life saving, my wife is life and death organized. I am death organized. So if it doesn't really matter what the outcome is, then I'm your guy. We can just hang out and we'll have fun together. And where we end up, I don't know, but it'll be fun.
I like it.
Yeah. So I guess that's kind of my long rambling stimulants are wearing off answer to a moment where change.
That I like it. It's good. Hey Alex, wacky. If you type exclamation Q and then your question and then press enter, then your question will be entered. I cleared out the one that was just the Q. But also, if you just ask a question in chat, like I'm also watching chat, so if you
I've
don't
got it
have
pulled
to,
up too. Thanks
yeah,
for.
yeah. So if there's something that you have a question about and you forget like exclamation point Q, it's still okay. We still got you. So, your son was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and it's something that you're really passionate about helping with. So, could you describe the levels of autism and kind of how those are diagnosed for us?
Oh, okay. Diagnosis. This is going to get kind of fun.
Okay.
Um, we'll come around to that. Okay, so there was a big change between the DSM-4 and the DSM-5 in autism diagnoses, and that was kind of controversial. Um, there were there was a lot of debate about the new uh, definition and how that was going to work, and fear that people who were on the PDD NOS, the pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified end, um, would be missed. They did away with the whole Asperger's diagnosis, although that's still a way that many people identify and
Mm-hmm.
find a tribe to belong to, is through
Right.
that was done away with. So in the current DSM, there are, I think it's 3 levels, and it's the level of support needed. Where somebody's going to need intensive support throughout their life. Somebody's going to need moderate support, and then somebody who will need limited or might be, independent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but to get into the whole diagnosis thing, um, so the way I work is a developmental strengths based model, and a diagnosis is a pathology. I mean, essentially, it's saying here's what's not right or here's what's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't really subscribe to that.
Yeah.
So the DSM is a diagnosis is nice if you need to access resources or services. It's a key that can open doors for resources.
Right.
Beyond that, I don't think it's really that effective at communicating what someone can do
Mm-hmm.
and what kind of things they struggle with. Um, so the model, a particular developmental framework I use is called DIR Floortime. And when you hear this, it's typically associated with autism, but this is a developmental framework that started first with Dr. Stanley Greenspan, who is a psychiatrist, and who was a psychiatrist. He passed away in 2010, I believe. But what he started with was looking at typical development, and how does this work? What kind of stages do we need to pass through? And there came a point where he actually wrote his own diagnostic manual because he said, autism, that doesn't tell me anything.
Right.
Hyper responsive to auditory stimuli and hypo responsive to tactile stimuli and stuff like that. Now we start to get a picture of how somebody actually experiences the world, and so we can target our support and education and all that kind of stuff at what somebody is good at, what they like, and to build scaffolding, accommodations, and support in areas where they have challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, diagnoses, like I said, for me is it's access to services, but really,
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what's important to the person, the individual, or the family I'm working with. What's important to you? How do you experience the world, and how can we help you be the most successful you can be? Not what I think you need, but what you want. I want my son to be autonomous, to be
Mm-hmm.
able to make his own decisions, and so I want that for the families and individuals that I serve too. I want you to pick. Don't let somebody tell you you're broken or there's something wrong
Right.
with you.
Yeah. No,
So
I think that's great. I mean, stressing that a diagnosis isn't like the end of the world, but we were talking about last week. We were talking about misdiagnosis in mental health and some of the reasons that sometimes you're purposefully misdiagnosed is to get greater access to resources that would benefit you, and those kinds of things. So it's really important to me, and we talk about this quite a bit actually, just to understand that you're way more than just a diagnosis on paper, because my depression doesn't look like someone else's depression at all. Like, they're completely different. What causes it is different. How you treat it is different. Some of the strategies are different. So I think that that's great that you really kind of look at that as just all right, let's get this kind of out of the way and get it where we need it to get, so you have access to those resources. I think that's great. There's nothing wrong with that.
yeah, and that's another part of why I went into the career that I did. So I was a software engineer. How did I end up a counselor? I found cool stuff, and I'm like, this is really neat. I want to share with other
Yeah.
families that your kid's not broken. Okay, just
Mm-hmm.
let's focus on strengths and let's have fun and just build happy, healthy kids. Not build kids. That just sounds weird, but you know what I mean.
Well, I mean,
Support the
build them
growth
up,
of the child.
yeah.
Build them up there. I like that. So rambling. Where was I going with that? I don't know. I'll come back to it.
That's okay. That's all right. We do have a question, and this is a little bit on the ADHD side of the conversation, which we'll get to in a minute, but we'll go ahead and talk about this question now. So, Wacky Foreigner Show said, my husband has alcohol use disorder, which has been in remission for 2 years now. He was recently diagnosed with ADHD by a psychiatrist. We're afraid of Adderall or stimulants used for treating ADHD. Can these meds trigger relapse? That's a great question.
Ooh, yeah, that is a great question, and I'm not a medical doctor or psychiatrist, so I don't. I'm not sure what the answer is there, but I can say that. So there are 4 different ways to alter our neurochemistry. One of my mentors had her unifying theory of everything's neurochemistry. So, 4 ways you can alter your neurochemistry. One is through drugs, medicine, and that usually works pretty quick, and that's why people tend to go for that. It's quickest and easiest.
Yep.
But you can also change your neurochemistry by uh, moderating or altering your diet.
Mm-hmm.
What you eat can affect your neurochemistry. Um, Exercise, how you spend your time, just getting out in nature and not like walking down the street, but out into non-urban,
Yeah.
non-suburban even areas can make a big impact. So that's medicine, and then those two, and then of course the fourth one, where I spend most of my time, is how we think can actually affect our neurochemistry.
Mm-hmm.
In cancer treatments, they practice positive imaging to help restore and help boost the immune system. So that can affect your body, can also affect your mood. If you spend your time thinking on positive things, it makes it easier to see positive things. Not that that fixes everything. You're just not thinking right. No, that's it, you can do a little bit with those other things. So when it comes to medication, usually what I try to see is first what we can we do through diet, exercise, says the fat guy, and counseling. Uh, but then, yeah, if you still aren't where you want to be, you think maybe there's something more that you can do, then yeah, I think medicine is a great thing to try. I'm on stimulants myself, and it's not the silver bullet I hoped it would be. It doesn't make me want to do things that are hard, but it helps my memory, helps me modulate my attention a lot better. Um, so yeah, that's especially thinking of drug, alcohol use. Um, yeah, I would definitely recommend checking with a medical doctor or psychiatrist on that kind of stuff. And another quick little rant for me: I'm not real crazy about general practitioners um, distributing meds uh, for mental health. Docs.
Yeah, she mentioned a psychiatrist. It was diagnosed by a psychiatrist, so I'm thinking probably it was recommended by a
Oh
psychiatrist.
no, I didn't mean that case in general.
Yeah. Okay.
Just
Gotcha.
just
Gotcha.
my mom goes into the general practitioner. Or I went into the general practitioner and said, I'm not feeling good. I'm kind of stuck. And he's like, well, I can write you a prescription for some antidepressants. And I'm like, no, can you give me a referral to a psychiatrist so I can go see somebody who specializes in that stuff?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's my little medical rant. Sorry, there wasn't a lot of help on that. But the other things can help support a change in neurochemistry to make that easier.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'll emphasize, just go over this with that psychiatrist and bring up your issues. Like, take a list of questions into the psychiatrist. I know that my husband's an alcoholic. He's been sober for 4 years, and when he had to have knee surgery, he was really concerned about some of the drugs that they used to put you under, some of the drugs they use whenever you when you're coming out, some of the prescriptions that they were going to prescribe after, because he wanted to make sure that wasn't going to put him into a tailspin. So he just had conversation after conversation after conversation and said, look, this better not happen. Like, how do I know this isn't going to happen? And what do I do if I think it's about to happen? So just constantly talking to your healthcare providers and just making sure that they understand your concerns. In my experience and our experience has been really helpful. Just making sure that you know that you have a voice and try to get comfortable using that voice.
That's what I was going to say. Advocacy can be really hard sometimes.
Yeah.
So I spent some time with my parents recently through some of their experiences with doctors, and they haven't felt confident talking to the doctors about concerns because, well, the doctor is educated and we didn't go to college, so we don't know So we just kind of assume that they know and let them do it. And I'm like, no, if there's stuff that concerns you, um, yeah, bring it up.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
you are only that easy, right? Like, oh, okay, suddenly I'm brave and articulate and I can
Yeah.
handle this.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit recently also, just saying, if I'm not comfortable or if I have a tendency to not ask questions, which that's not me. I ask all the questions. But I have to make sure that I write them down or I'll forget some of them and then be kicking myself afterwards. But the best example that I have right now is whenever my grandfather was first going in to talk to an oncologist about his breast cancer. So my dad was traveling out of the country and he was really concerned, wanted me to go and just kind of listen in so that I could communicate with him afterwards what had happened. And so my grandmother went with us and I went in with a list. I'm like, okay, I've got questions. Y'all gonna have to sit here and just let me ask the questions. And so we went in and, Grandpa's listening and he's asking a couple questions. Grandma's just kind of sitting there being very morally supportive of Grandpa. And we walked out and she said, you know what, honey, I'm really glad that you were there because I had a lot of those questions and I totally forgot to ask them. Like that thought as soon as we hit that doctor's office just went out of my head. So I would definitely say if you're one of those people who can't ask questions or who's uncomfortable asking questions, like get someone around you to go with you. There is nothing saying you can't take someone else to a doctor's appointment with you. You totally can. So
Absolutely.
just if you know you're not comfortable with that, grab someone who is and take them with you and give them your list. Let them be the bad guy and ask all the questions.
Oh yeah,
That's
that works really good.
yeah.
My wife's a nurse, so anytime I have stuff, I'm like, hey, get in here. Just
Yeah. Thank you. So glad you said you aren't a fan of general practitioners for writing addictive meds. Yep. I just reported one who contributed to my son's relapse despite her knowing his full history. Turns out she's already on the radar of our local hospital. Addiction is a very complex piece of the puzzle. It really, really is. That is very true. So going back a little bit, you mentioned DIR Floortime. Can you just kind of go over some of the benefits of that? And are there any downsides to that, specifically for an autism diagnosis, but then also just kind of in a child raising situation, I guess?
okay. So, like I said, it actually came out of looking at typical development and then looking at kids who are growing up in poverty and how that altered typical development.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then it's gone on and been applied to other things, most notably autism. But I think that's because it uh, the main goal is to support somebody in being able to relate and communicate. And autism is a diagnosis where those issues can be really complicated. So to me, it's like if you can show that that works here, then it makes sense that you could use that for other things. And I've used that with families with kids who had fetal alcohol syndrome, or just a family where they had a house fire, and so the one of the children was scared to go up and sleep in their room
Mm-hmm.
after that. They had woken up to the fire. So
Oh.
a typically developing child would experience trauma. Um, but what it does is it sets up first that fundamental to all learning and development is feeling safe, connected, and being able to regulate your senses and your emotions. So if you're the way that your body experiences things um, is different, that can affect how you understand what's going on around you. Maybe if you're really a lot of kids that I work with need, like we talked about, being in the water and
Mm-hmm.
massages and all that deep pressure.
Yeah.
So that's proprioception, which is one of our senses. It's kind of a bone on bone. It's how our brain makes a map of our body. It's why I can close my eyes
Mm-hmm.
and touch my nose, because my brain knows where my fingers are and where my nose is, even with my eyes closed. If you don't have a good map of your body, then moving through the world can be unpredictable.
Yeah.
Unpredictable is scary, anxiety, and so that can kind of shut you down because you just want to be protected.
Mm-hmm.
All of our senses, their first goal is protection. After that, it's discrimination. How much, how little, is that a good or a bad feel, or whatever. So anyway, floor time starts with regulation, and then it moves through different. They used to be called milestones or stages. Now they're referred to as capacities because it's not something that you check off. So
Mm-hmm.
I'll go through just real quick. The first ones are regulation, and that's feeling safe and comfortable in the world. If you think about a little baby, the baby cries, and you have to figure out what it is. You have to calm and soothe the baby. So you're teaching the baby through that interaction, through those experiences, what things feel good so they can calm and soothe themselves. So that's the first developmental capacity. And I say capacity because generally, you would consider an adult, somebody like me has mastered that capacity.
Mm-hmm.
But if you saw me when I realized that I was running behind tonight, my capacity for self-regulation, which is usually pretty good, was out the window. I was a mess. So it's a capacity. It's not something that I checked
Yeah.
off and I'm done forever. No, there are still things that can impact that.
Mm-hmm.
Then second is engagement. Once you have a baby calm and soothed, then you look at the baby looks back at you. You have this connection. You feel that emotional connection, that engagement, shared attention. You're both focusing on the same things. Is the second capacity. Third is reciprocity. That's where you start to signal back and forth. And even at a pre-verbal level, whether it's gestures or sounds, I mean, I'm talking and you're nodding. So you're communicating to me that
Mm-hmm.
you hear and understand what I'm saying. Um, that's the third capacity. Fourth is social problem solving. And that's when we start getting into that theory of mind and that idea that, um, you know, I can't do everything by myself, but I can use somebody else as a tool.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's not quite theory of mind yet, but yeah, just knowing that I'm not. I need help. I can get
Right.
other people to do things that I can't do, but in order to do that, I have to be able to communicate what I want and need. And then we get into symbolic thinking, imagination, symbols or words. Now we can hear sounds. I've got these sounds coming out of my face, but you understand what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
We create these pictures in our heads that match, and we know that a sound could be an idea or a actual physical thing, or an emotion. Love. I mean, how abstract, how hard is that to learn? So that's the fifth. And then the sixth is building bridges between ideas, logical thinking, and starting to figure out really how the world works. And typically, those six capacities are all in place around 4 or 5 years old. But if something goes off, if something's off track, individual differences, yeah, like let's say that you are really averse to tactile stimulation.
Mm-hmm.
You get something on your hands and it freaks you out, so you don't want to touch things. So think about how that limits the development of that map in your
Right.
brain, and how your limited experiences makes it harder for you to be able to predict how things work. And so that all gets into, for development of any kind, these are all the steps that everybody goes through, but having that framework laid out like that, no matter if the concern is anxiety or autism or Down syndrome or trauma or depression, we can look at development and where is somebody developmentally, what kind of things are interfering with their ability to move forward, and then what kind of things support that. When they say, in school, the best teacher or the best class, what did you like the most? That's kind of like when you don't realize that you're learning, you're just having fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when we feel safe and connected, when we're doing things we like, we feel good at, um, we're willing to take risks. We're more resilient. So floor time, that's the way that I approach any communication, any relationship. So how, I think that neurology, neuroscience is starting to show that. If you look at things like Stephen Porges and the polyvagal theory, how uh, our senses all come in through our limbic system first, through that vagal nerve, or the vagus nerve. My nurse wife over here correcting me. Is it the vagus nerve? Yeah. Okay. Vagus nerve vagal response. Okay. So that I think is stuff outside of psychology that still supports floor time, and that's the way our bodies work. First, information comes in, it goes through our emotions. We have to get past that protective response
Mm-hmm.
to get to the cortical, the logical processing. Um, so I think that that's an approach that works for anything. What are some of the drawbacks? Um, a lot of times I'll get called into a situation because there'll be a child whose speech is delayed. That's most noticeable. They're not talking.
Mm-hmm.
So a speech therapist goes in and then says, "There's behavior problems, Mike. There's behavior problems." And so I go in and I'm like, "There aren't behavior problems. They're communicating that something is hard or scary or unknown." And so I go in and try and figure out, how does your body experience things? How do you experience the world? Where are you developmentally, and how can we do something fun that supports that? And then those behavioral things, which Dr. Greenspan, who, like I said, developed the DIR Floortime model, he said behavior is a downstream effect. And if you can address the cause, if you can address what really the issue is, then the behavior will take care of itself. There won't be a need for that kind of communication because the problem is gone, or because
Mm-hmm.
somebody feels safe now, or they feel connected, and even when it's hard, you know. But anyway, sometimes parents will say, "My child is biting. I want him to stop biting." So a behavioral approach to that, a lot of people see and think, "I want that. That's quick. Just stop the biting." And with floor time, yeah, stopping the biting is important because that's safety, but I want to know why, and I want to address the why. And if we can do that, and I can be there to intervene, or a parent, the closest relationship, we feel closest, or we feel safest with people that we have strong relationships with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing about floor time too. Ultimately, I want to work myself out of a job. I want the family to be able to understand what's going on with the child so that they can support the child and they don't need me.
Mm-hmm.
Because the child, they're the expert on their child anyway. That child is never going to be as close with me, feel as safe with me as they do with, the caregivers, primary
Right.
caregivers. So that's another thing that's different. But a lot of parents don't want that responsibility. Like, that's hard, or I just need some respite. It's all the time, and I just need a break. Can
Mm-hmm.
somebody just come in and fix this problem? So if there was a downside to floor time, um, I would say that's what it is. I think floor time is for all kids, and even for all adults. My wife floor times me tonight. I'm trying to get her, really getting frazzled, and so my wife's like, "Here, let me do this for you." And quiet, and trying to counterbalance, trying to help co-regulate with me to bring me back down to a state where I can elevate to logical thinking and processing.
Yep.
So works with me too, but it's not for all parents or all teachers, because then really because of the relationship, because of the connection, really that makes them the best person for the job, and that sometimes that responsibility can be scary, overwhelming. Um, so yeah, I guess I would say that would be a drawback. But I'm a floor time zealot. I mean, I literally changed careers because of this.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
biased answer,
Yeah.
naturally.
We have another question. So, do you have any handy dandy cheap resources for weighted blankets? That kind of goes back to the the kind of physical,
For
yeah.
sure.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, cheap resources. I know here in Georgia, there's a list, and there's a group that they make weighted blankets, and they'll send them out to people on the list. The problem is the list, there's always a long waiting list of
Hmm.
people. So having that actually come around can be tough. I am not crafty at all. Again, that organizational kind of thing that my brain just but if you're crafty, you can look up how to make a weighted blanket. And there are different ways you can do it: putting bean bags into little pouches,
Hmm.
um, getting different materials to put inside something. Weighted vest, although for that I would uh, strongly encourage talking to an occupational therapist for that, um, because there are different ideas about, will a child habituate to the weighted vest? Will they get used to it so it'll be less effective? How much weight do you put in? How much weight is safe to put in
Hmm.
for a child?
Yeah.
And that's outside my scope of practice. So yeah, cheap resources. If you're a crafty person, yeah, you can find on the web how to make them. If you're not a crafty person, um, find a friend who is crafty.
Find a crafty friend. Yeah, she said because piling on three comforters isn't a great solution in Texas. That is the truth.
Oh yeah, I live in Atlanta,
Yeah.
and I like sleep better with deep pressure, so I need a heavy blanket on me. But it's also Atlanta, so I set
Yes.
the thermostat to like 65 at night, and I have the ceiling fan on high, and I like stick one leg out from under the cover. So yeah, that can
Yeah.
definitely be tricky. I have an OT friend who used to make snakes, and they're little, cloth snakes, and they had, I don't know what they had in them. They had something in them so you could put them around your neck, and that would
Hmm.
help. And she made those and weighted blankets for a while for kids. Another neat thing is lycra, making a body sock. If you sew lycra up so that there's like an opening and you climb into it, so that it's like pushing on your body, and lycra you can
Hmm.
stretch out.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like a snuggie, except for your feet too, not just like the armholes kind of thing.
Right.
That works for some people. Crash cushions, OTs, a lot of the OTs I work with have what they call crash cushions, and that's just get a big old fitted sheet or two, and then go to a furniture store or something and say, hey, the things you get rid of, can we? Sometimes they'll tear the foam out, when they're separating stuff, and you can take foam, cut it into chunks, stuff it inside a fitted sheet, and sew that up, and then that's like a beanbag chair or something, you can put, or you can just collapse on it, and that kind of wraps around you a little bit. So yeah, there's lots of ways to get that proprioception. Weighted blankets, yeah, uh, but you can just try different things. My son, for a while, for a long time, he had a denim comforter on his bed because it
Hmm.
was really heavy. He loved that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's lots of different things you can try to still get that same kind of thing, or make your own weighted vest, not vest, weighted blanket.
Yeah.
They definitely talk to OT about. But
Yeah.
I'd say talk to an OT too about the weighted blankets too. They might have more resources.
She
There I
said that's
am.
all really good info. She said, super glad I asked. So there you
Okay,
go.
good.
Wacky said, sorry, I'm new at this. What's the theoretical orientation of Mr. Fields? What type of therapist would handle things the way he does?
So floor time as a developmental model, I actually teach classes, the Interdisciplinary Council for Development and Learning, the ICDL, um, teaches classes on that approach, and educators, physical therapists, occupational therapists, counselors, psychologists, social workers, speech and language therapists, music therapists, uh, drama and recreational therapists can all um, be trained in floor time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it's just really, it's just learning this framework of development. If you learn the natural stages that things have to go through in order to be uh, connected to you, in order to have this back and forth, I have to feel safe and connected. So that's going to be really an OT thing. Are there things that are interfering with their body and how they experience the world? OTs are great with that.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you get up into reciprocity, symbolic thinking, and shared social problem solving, those kind of higher capacities, speech and language therapists are great at that.
Yeah.
So an awareness of that framework, you can still use your individual discipline or training within that framework to support strengths based, with whoever you're working with. What do you like? What are you good at? How can we have fun? How can we support you with the things that are hard? And floor time acts like a roadmap for whatever discipline you use. For parents, there's the parent advocate for the ICDL, is her name is Daria, and she has a website called affectautism.com, and that makes floor time a little less clinical, kind of breaks it down so that it's easier to understand for a layman. Um, and again, it is uh, demonstrated, on the site and talked about in the context of autism, but it's still development. It's a developmental model.
I just put that website that you mentioned into chat as well. So there we go.
Mhm.
So anyone can be trained on this model, but are specialists out there? Is there a way to find someone who is a specialist in something like this?
Yes. So the ICDL.com, is who does the training. Um, and then ICDLdirectory.com takes you straight to the list of different providers who have gone through the training and the level of training that they've received. And that's
Oh
also
yeah, there we
linked
go.
from ICDL.com.
Gotcha. Okay, there's that link as well.
Yeah.
To this is linked to icdldirectory.com, and then if you
Mm-hmm.
want to shorten that to learn more about ICDL, you can just knock that part out.
And there'll be a place on there looking for a provider, and that takes you to
Yeah,
ICDL Directory.
there you go. Okay, so you're in your bio. You mentioned praxis. Can you define that for us to kind of tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, um, praxis is how do we make things happen? So it covers everything from first having an idea. What do we want to do? And then when we have this idea, how do we make that happen? And sometimes, like with a baby, it's as simple as I'm not safe, I'm not comfortable, so I'm going to make a sound, a cry. It's a simple one step thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it can get obviously more complicated. Like, I want to take a sip of my root beer right now. So I have to know where the bottle is. I have to visually find it. Then I have to coordinate the movement of my hand to reach for it. And then I have to feel it and know how much pressure to use to pick it up. And then I got to coordinate my other hand and bring it in and take the top off, and then watch and see, is it going to spray on me, and then take the top off and then get that to my mouth, turn it the right amount. So praxis is all of those steps, just ideation, and then coming up with a plan. And if the plan has multiple steps, is there a sequence? Do those steps have to happen in a certain order?
Mm-hmm.
And then at any one of those steps, at ideation, at the planning, or at the sequencing step, something could go wrong. So then you have to adapt or change your plan. And this all seems really simple. It happens almost without thinking. I mean, we don't pay a lot of attention to, well, I'm going to take a drink. But think if, you don't know how, think of watching a baby do it and
Mm-hmm.
how hard it is. Or, a toddler. Here, toddler, pour some milk on your cereal. That's fun, right?
I won't even
And
let my 5-year-old pour his own milk.
because there's really a lot of practice that goes into that.
Yeah, right.
Uh, and all that is praxis. So another thing, if you have trouble coming up with an idea, maybe because of a lack of experience or because your body is not giving you information in a way that is easy to make sense of, um, it makes those kind of things scary. So having problems with praxis can be a huge source of anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
because things aren't predictable. If you don't know what's going to happen, you know, uh, just put that down. We're going to go outside. What if I don't know what's outside? What if I don't know you? That adds stress to that experience. And maybe I've never been to this place before, so I don't know what's on the other side of the door. So that could be really scary. Um, and that can lead to anxiety and shutting down. So praxis is huge, especially with the individuals and the families I work with,
Yeah.
and at all the levels, even from ideation, well, this kid is really stubborn, or they're really manipulative. They will cry until they get what they want. Is that manipulation? Which, if you think about it, is really a sophisticated idea, because I don't have to just know that somebody else thinks and feels something different than what I think, but what I do can change what they think, which can change what they do.
Mm-hmm.
Really sophisticated idea. But no, this 1 year old, or this 18-month-old, or this 2 year old is being manipulative. Maybe it's a praxis issue. Maybe they only have one idea.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they don't know what to do to solve this problem, and all they can do is cry.
Yeah.
So if you can help them, well, let's start doing multiple steps. Or instead of teaching them directly what to do, here, do this. No, explore stuff. Let them try. Let them fail.
Yeah.
But it's okay, because we're still together, and it's safe, and failing is okay. And try it again. And then that praxis starts to develop. And then they have other ideas. And then making plans or adapting when things don't go right isn't as scary. And the kids just blossom.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, praxis. Anytime I see anxiety in anybody, the first thing I think is, I wonder if they're able to predict what's going to happen. And if not, how can we support that?
Yeah, that's a great line of thinking too, because so much of anxiety is just fearing kind of the unknown, or fearing not being able to control something.
Exactly. Yeah, control. We all want control that helps us feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
The trick is, and this is another kind of joke that my wife and I have, control is just an illusion.
Oh yeah.
You don't really ever control anything. I mean, I could have a heart attack like right now. So any plan that I had, nothing. Um, of course, her response to that is, okay, control may be an illusion, but chaos is real and I got to get it together. So finding the balance in there, feeling safe, having that, yes, I know I'm not in control, but I know when I'm scared, doing this helps me.
Mm-hmm.
And with autism or anxiety, things that are ritualized or repetitive, those things aren't a pathology. That's something that's calming and soothing. That's why that ritual is there. It's predictable, it's control, or at least the illusion of control in a scary moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, a lot of times with autism, it's like, well, they're doing this thing repetitively. We need to stop that. No, we need to start with that because that tells us that they're not feeling safe. They're not
Mm-hmm.
comfortable.
Right.
Start with that. And then how can we use that to, when they do feel safe, to start to change it a little bit so they can start to solve problems and develop praxis so they can be more resilient and less afraid when they don't know what's going to happen next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Uh, Bite says, I opened a drink earlier, wasn't looking at it because it had been sitting for over an hour, so surely it was safe to open. Went everywhere before I even realized what was happening. Yeah, that's always a fun time. So
I was running
how...
a game last night at a gaming conference and reached over and grabbed my drink and opened it and blew all over me.
Oh, yeah.
Because I wasn't paying attention. I just assumed everything was going to work the way my brain planned it, and praxis fail.
Yeah, our brains like to plan stuff and then it doesn't always happen. So how do you work with someone with ASD to overcome challenges executing or communicating things as they're intending to?
Okay, so a lot of times with autism, there is a motor issue as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's that praxis thing, figuring out the body's not moving like it should, or not inputting or outputting or processing or something. I was at a summer camp a couple years ago, and there's a boy there who spoke in scripts, and he had this one script that he kept repeating. The first, second day we were up at camp, and it was a Pete the Cat story, and Pete the Cat stepped in water and it messed up his shoes, but did he cry? Oh heavens no, he just kept going along singing a song. And so I he would start that script and I would jump in, I'm like, I missed that, can you say that again? Until I heard the whole script, I got it, and then I was thinking, what could this mean? So Pete the Cat, something happens. Did he get upset? No. Upset. Pete the Cat got upset. This kid is upset. And I asked him, I'm like, you miss your mom. You're at the sleepaway camp and you miss your mom. And he looked at me and he didn't use that script again. So everything we do is communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear parents or therapists or teachers or whatever will say sometimes, the kid did this for no reason, and I'll say no apparent reason. We may not understand it, but there is a reason there. There's something being communicated, and if we can figure out what that is, not take this is maladaptive or this is unknown or it's weird and it makes me uncomfortable. A lot of times that's what therapy is. It's like you're weirding people out. So stop doing that. You suck it up or do whatever you got to do to not make me feel uncomfortable. No, if I can be there and give the give the person a safe space and say, I really want to know, what's going on.
Yeah.
You can get to whatever that nugget is. And the more experience you have with it, the better your relationship. I come in and parents are like, well, you're the expert. I'm like, we're experts. You're the expert on your child. I need your help.
Yeah.
I know development, but that doesn't do anything. We have to figure out how we can use that to support your child. You're the expert on that. So let's work together. Um, so yeah, just trying to be open and, you know, listen, be compassionate, be present. Don't try to drive an agenda. I want to make this happen, and that doesn't fit in with my plan, so I'm just going to snuff that out.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just, yeah, I want to know what you're saying. I'm not getting it. I'm sorry. And that's another thing, presumed competence. I talked to this kid like he could understand me. And I don't know how many people did that.
Yeah.
You know, they see he's doing scripts, so they, you know, they're thinking, oh, well, he's just a, you know, they treat him like a toddler or talk about him right in front of him like he doesn't know. But I came up to him and I would say, you know, I really want to know what you're saying. I'm trying, but I can't get it. Can you say it again? And then just trying to guess. And, you know, that would give him an opportunity to, dude, that's not even close. Like, what the heck
Right.
was that?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, like, that's it. You're getting somewhere. Um, so yeah, it's about the process, you know, just being there, trying to make it safe and trying to understand.
Yeah. So by Mark asks, are there opportunities to volunteer to help with these types of programs, or does the hands-on nature mean extensive training is typically required?
And um, hold on, can you say that again?
So are there opportunities to volunteer to help with these types of programs, or does the hands-on nature mean extensive training is required?
Um, Dr. Greenspan used to say that that there's no such thing as bad floor time. If you're playing, if you're, you know, trying to connect, if you're trying to be supportive, that's awesome. And a lot of times for families who are overwhelmed, you know, we'll say, is there anyone in your community? You know, whether it's kids from a local school or, you know, at the nearby church or temple or mosque or um, anybody, do you know anybody that's playful? And start there.
Yeah.
You know, you want respite, say, hey, come play with my kid for 30 minutes. And then maybe you can build up groups. And at one point, we had a thing in Atlanta that we called floor time players, and it started with a lot of kids from a local private school, and you know they wanted hours and credits and all that kind of stuff for moving through school and going down into secondary or post secondary uh, stuff. And so it would be, yeah, come on here, come volunteer, come work with this family, come play with
Right.
this for an hour on Saturday, or you know, when you get done with school, swing by and you know play for 30 minutes. So yeah, anybody can do it, um, but it's the people who have it, that you know, emotional openness,
Mm-hmm.
compassion, that connection, and just start there. And you know, yeah, you can build on that. You can get more training and, you know, as much as you want, but just the connection is to uh, the the real thing is just to that connection, just to try and be there for it.
Yeah. So if all right, so I'll take me for example. So I'm an adult. I have 4 kids. None of them are on the spectrum, but if I wanted to go and just volunteer to play with kids who were, to give them kind of another safe contact, where would I go to do that?
um, so you could go to any community centers, you know, like a YMCA
Mm-hmm.
or a school,
Oh,
a
yeah.
library, and say, hey, do you have programs for kids who are on the spectrum? And do you need help with that? Could I come in and read a book, or could I come in and sing a song, or um, teach a dance class, or build birdhouses, or you know, whatever
Yeah.
your passion is. That's another thing that's really key to floor time is um, emotion. So in psychology, there's the what they call the ABCs of psychology: action, behavior, and cognition. And all theories in psychology say that one of those is primary. Either if we can, um, no, affect, behavior, and cognition. Sorry, I said that wrong. So, like a behavioral therapist is going to focus on, if we can change your behavior, that will affect what you think and how you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about intensive trainings, like for military, where they do drills and repeat stuff, what that does is that programs that praxis in at a at a really strong level, so that it's almost uh, habitual. It's not something you really have to focus on, but when the
Right.
situation comes up, you respond automatically to that. So in those cases, that it's taking, we'll focus on the behavior, change the behavior, and that will, everything else will follow it. So that's how that works. There's cognitive behavior therapy, which is, um, that's a really big theory now, a really dominant thing in the field, and that's if you can change how you're thinking, change what you think. Like, I have this idea that I'm a failure, or I'm no good, or whatever. Is that real? And if we can get to the point where we realize that that's not something, that's information that's coming in, this is just something that I've generated, so that may not be real. So hey, wait, I've changed my cognition now, and now behavior and affect will follow.
Mm-hmm.
Floor time says that affect is primary, that everything comes through emotions. And like I was saying, talking about the polyvagal theory, and how all of our senses come in through our limbic system first, that fits with how floor time sees everything, is that everything is about affect, everything is about emotion. So it, when I'm working with somebody, I may exaggerate my emotion because I want to make things really clear. Maybe you have trouble with reading expressions on somebody's face. So if I combine my tone of voice and my face and my actions, then that affect comes through bigger. And then our
Mm-hmm.
brain dual encodes stuff. Our brain stores information first as a sensory experience, but if we have a strong emotion connected to it, it stores it sort of like a alternate route, I guess, to it through our emotions. And if you think back through your life, what are the things that really stand out in your memory? They're going to be things that are attached to strong emotions, whether it was something
Right.
really happy or really sad or really scary. It's not going to be like, oh, I remember on August 13th, I had a tuna melt for lunch. There's no emotional connection there, but I remember where I was, and what the day was like when I proposed to my wife. Kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, so no one does anything for no reason, not adults, children, or animals, yes. What if it was a really good tuna melt, though? I don't know that there's a tuna melt out there
Well,
that is that good.
then there would be some. Here's where I have a psychologist friend who tells me, Mike, you're being too jargony. But I like the jargony words sometimes. Uh, if it was really good, then that means that there was something emotionally salient about that tuna melt. You had a strong emotion about that, and then you would remember. Um, here's an affective experience with food. So I hate salmon. Growing up, hated it. Every time I ever ate salmon, it's like, this is not. Why do people eat this? This is not good stuff. So, what was it, a year and a half, 2.5 years ago, we took an Alaskan cruise, and we were out there, and it's like salmon, 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 everything's salmon, fresh salmon, here's salmon, and I'm like, okay, okay, fine, we have some salmon, and it was really good, and I was shocked by that because it wasn't my experience, and so the cognition that follows that affect is that fresh Alaskan salmon is good. Any other salmon is not good. It's really weird too. Here's also the affective connection, because I had that really different experience. It was a different emotion, so it really registered. So it's dual encoded in my brain. But then something else, that because I was in that heightened state of affect, that I remembered is, we got back on the cruise ship, Alaskan cruise, and one night in the dining room they were serving Atlantic salmon.
Oh,
Like,
No.
what? But Alaskan, no,
This
no,
does not compute. Mm-mm.
yeah. So see, not a good tuna, but it was a really good salmon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yes, Alaskan cruise, exactly. Yeah. So, how often do anxiety and autism appear together? And is it difficult to kind of recognize when there is an anxiety diagnosis in addition to ASD or vice versa?
Um, so I there it's about 40% of 40% of cases with autism there's an associated anxiety diagnosis with. But again, for me, the diagnosis thing is not as important. So if I see somebody who's anxious, like I said, I think praxis,
Mm-hmm.
ideation, where's this breaking down? Um, so regardless if it's an individual who's autistic, or it's somebody that doesn't have that diagnosis, if they're experiencing uh, situations where they're overwhelmed or shut down, or have a big emotional response that they can't deal with, I'm going to use floor time, that developmental framework, and look at individual differences. How do you experience the world? What's that like? How can we make this safe and
Yeah.
predictable? And then let's look at your praxis, and when you're able to understand what's happening, a lot of times that helps. But then if that doesn't quite get it, then yeah, naturally I would encourage, let's go to a nutritionist, look at your, is there any way that you can support that? Work with a dietitian or something. Make sure that you're getting exercise, and yeah, maybe you want to go to a psychiatrist too, and see, is there anything else that can help
Mm-hmm.
at that angle. So I look at them as kind of separate anyway, whether they are or not, because it's still just human development for me. How
Right.
can we scaffold and make accommodations for the things that are hard?
Yep. So you said 40% of the time there's an autism diagnosis. There's also an anxiety diagnosis.
Hmm.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and then another one that I was looking up is for ADHD
Mm-hmm.
and autism. That I've seen anywhere from 11 to 80%.
Wow, that's a wide 11 to 80%. That's a wide range.
Yeah, really crazy. And the differences in those really depends on what was being looked at as to whether they made an association there or
Mm-hmm.
not. Um, but again, if somebody is having symptoms, they look like they're inattentive or impulsive. Why is that? So let's again look at their individual differences. How are they experiencing the world? Are they getting uh, the right information? Are they able to process it? Um, Kids who are hypo or underreactive to auditory stimulus might look inattentive. Um, Kids naturally are, can be really active,
Yeah.
um, and learning to control impulses naturally takes a while. But what can also look like that? An inability to stay regulated can cause problems with your attention. If you're not engaged, being connected to another individual can help you control of uh, your level of focus and attention. If I have something that I have to work on by myself, and it's something that has low emotional salience, I don't want to do it, and it's hard, and you left me by myself, it's not good. But if I'm with somebody and that somebody is doing something that supports me in being able to do something. So it makes my ability to attend and to focus makes it look better.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, what is really ADHD, and then what is just breakdowns in development? I still go back to that floor time framework and say, here's where I see a hole, or here's where I can
Right.
see something that's not working as good as this person needs to be successful. So we either need to figure out how we can help build that up, or what kind of accommodations do we need to put in place. And like for me, I've tried all kinds of stuff. And, I know that being with somebody helps my focus and attention. I know that movement helps my focus and attention. I know that having a list and having it visible and nearby, having it and then putting it away doesn't helps. So I've got all these things that I I really think my capacity on these things is, I don't know how much more I can do, but I can do these other things to help support that. Put
Yeah.
these accommodations.
Yeah. Yeah. Firework says when someone else is cleaning, I also cleaning.
Yeah.
I also clean. Yeah, that's very true. Like if we're both at home and it's at the end of the day, I don't care how busy the day was. If my husband gets up and cleans something, I'll be like, oh, he's cleaning. Well, I guess I'll get up and clean something too.
Yeah.
Except the things I like to clean, I do those on my own. But like picking things up and moving them to other rooms, never gonna do that left to my own devices. That's a good point. That is a good point. So ADHD and autism have kind of that comorbid overlap of anywhere from 11 to 80%, which is crazy. So how common is ADHD just in general outside of that comorbid diagnosis, and when are most people first diagnosed with ADHD alone, I guess?
I think for boys it's around 7. I think for girls it's a little later, and there's the autism diagnoses are later for girls too. And what that seems to be is girls are better at masking, at doing things that look social. I guess kind of the stereotypical gender things for boys are um, where those kind of stand out more. Girls tend to be, again, stereotypically, um, the quiet, the readers, the nature,
Mm-hmm.
all that kind of stuff. Where it's not like in your face, like little boys like like getting in trouble and all over.
Right.
Um, but how common is it? Again, for me, I look at, I think, praxis with that. Is it ADHD? Maybe. I don't really particularly care about that part. But thinking about praxis, exercise, diet, support, accommodations, um, play, doing things that you like. I think ADHD is a really bad name anyway. Attention deficit. Sometimes I can be so focused on something
Mm-hmm.
that everything else disappears. So it's not always an attention deficit. It's a problem with regulating how much attention
Mm-hmm.
you should be using to focus on something. Um, so, yeah, and the difference in ADD and ADHD, ADD isn't used as much anymore. And when it is, it's usually referring to um, the inattentive type of ADHD. ADHD, I was diagnosed at 40 when I changed careers to become a counselor. The psychologist I was working with one day in supervision said, "Hey, Mike, let me ask you a few questions." And she pulled out the DSM and flipped through it. And she goes, "You, my friend, or what was it? I think at the time it was a 31411 or something like that. ADHD combined type, both impulsive and hyperactive. So ADD isn't used as much, but
Mm-hmm.
when it is, it's ADHD impulsive without the hyperactive
Yeah.
part.
Yeah. Yeah, Bite, that's a good point. So girls are socially expected to be quieter. That's absolutely true. So if they aren't making any social connections, it's not as easily noticed because they are quieter. That's a good point. Fees. Hey, Fees. She says I'm quiet until I get loud. I
And
do not.
sometimes you need to be loud.
Yeah.
What is it? Patrick Swayze in Roadhouse? Be nice. Be nice until it's time to not be nice.
There you
Quiet
go.
until to not be quiet.
Mm-hmm. I do not have a deficit of attention. I'm just not giving that attention to the thing that I'm supposed to be paying attention to. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and that I like the supposed in quotes.
Mm-hmm.
Who decides priority? Maybe maybe it's supposed because somebody else thinks that that's worthy of my focus and attention, and I don't,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm okay with that. I think one of the big challenges, one of the big problems, I was going to say one of the big problems in work, especially with kids, is that it's compliance based, and we
Yeah.
don't give kids autonomy. They're trained that they have to say yes to authorities. And when I go in and work with a kid, I want a kid who tells me no. If you've just got a kid who only says yes, only does what an authority tells them, that's setting them up for the victim.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
setting them up for abuse. That's scary. I do not want to teach a kid to be compliant. I don't want them to not say no. When a kid says no, it means that what I'm asking them to do is uncomfortable, it's scary, it's unpredictable, they don't feel safe, something in there. And that is information for me. That
Yeah.
tells me a little bit more about how they experience the world, what's important to them, and how can I, again, support their development or create accommodations around things that are difficult.
Yep. Absolutely. So, is there a general tip you could share for someone who is struggling with ADHD to help them combat some of the more common symptoms?
Um, with floor time, individual differences is big. Everybody has their own strengths, their own
Mm-hmm.
weaknesses. Find what works for you. Like I said, I am a pathological extrovert. So being around someone else is regulating for me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the first things I know that I need. If I'm having trouble with something, I need to make it social. I need to bring somebody else in. My wife and son are not like that. They need quiet and alone to process. And dad just wants to, but, I want to talk, let's talk about this. So yeah, for it's different. But common things are, I hate making lists, but they really do help. I need visual reminders. I need something
Mm-hmm.
to prompt me. That's why the social part is so big. I can use somebody else's executive functioning. Like, here, let me just plug in and borrow this for a minute. So yeah, that's the biggest one for me. But yeah, just find what works for you. And to do that, to know what works for you, what are the things you really like? What are the things that you are successful with, that you feel good about? And then why is that? What makes that happen? And then can you take part of that and use it for the stuff that sucks or is boring or hard or whatever?
Yeah. So, you also mentioned the intentional application of cooperative board games and
Yeah.
RPGs to create opportunities for development. I think you just said you were at a gaming convention recently. So, how did you first become interested in exploring the benefits of gaming in kind of a therapeutic setting?
So first of all, I'm a huge nerd. Always have been.
Nerds are great.
Yes. And I love social stuff. I'm one of those people that I don't really like. I'm not really competitive. So competitive games, yeah, I won. It's like, I don't care. I don't mind losing. So I like cooperative games. But anyway, D&D, stuff like that. I played that when I was a kid. There was a game, Top Secret. that I played in high school. It was kind of like D&D, except James Bond. It used modern weapons and vehicles.
Oh,
So
that's
that was,
fun.
yeah. And, just board games too. And especially with the resurgence in board gaming in, I don't know, the last 5 or 10 years, it just seems like there's, Kickstarter and there's like games popping up all over the place. So I started getting into gaming, and I got some buddies who run a website called nerdsonearth.com. And they do reviews of games, movies, TVs, comics, and write lots of articles. And they even do some psychology on there. I've written a couple of articles for them on games and psychology. Um, so I got plugged back into gaming and the new board games and stuff like that through them. And so I'm like, oh, cool. Well, I found this game and I want to learn more about this. And we're playing Dungeons and Dragons, so I want to research a character. So I'm going to start googling around, and I stumbled across some guys who were doing that in different parts of the world. There's Adam Davis and Adam Johns. They've got a 501c3 in Seattle called Game to Grow. I think the website's gametogrow.org, I think. And then I found a guy who's here in Pennsylvania. I'm in Harrisburg right now. The conference just ended yesterday. And his name is Jack Birkenstock, and he's the CEO for a 501c3. He over here in York, Pennsylvania. His group is called the Bodhana Group, and that's the website, thebodhanagroup. I think that one's .com. Bodhana is Bodhana. Bodhana Group. And so I'm like, wait a second. I love being in a service profession. I love being a helper. I love being with people, and I love gaming. And this is a thing you can do. You can do this together. So I got in touch with Jack, and for the last 3 years, I've been coming up here in October. The second weekend in October every year is what he calls Save Against Fear. It's a conference that the Bodhana Group puts together. It started off as about 30 people in a local game store just playing games to raise money. And this year there were 450 people. This was the ninth Saving Against Fear. And they've also added workshops for therapists where we talk about games and therapy, and then we actually play games and show practical application of those. And yeah, that's Save Against Fear, Banana Group's fundraiser every second weekend in October. That's amazing. But if you think about times when you have played games, lots of people say, well, yeah, playing games was therapeutic. I learned how to take perspectives, learned how to be patient. I learned math. I mean, you can learn all kinds of stuff through games. But when you have a therapist, I can make it more than just, yeah, it's therapeutic. I feel better. I learned, after I've done it. I can, say, what are the things that you want to work on? What's important to you? And then I can create scenarios in a game, particularly in an RPG. I mean, essentially, it's narrative therapy or recreational therapy or drama therapy. It's that kind of thing where you're just playing out a story, and the characters we create, there's always a piece of us in there. It's either something we want to be or something that we wonder what it would be like to be that, or this is who I am. But I get to try things in where it's safe to do. I get to try it in a safe, and maybe sometimes somebody says something to you and it bothers you, and you do just want to punch them in the face. You can do that. Now you learn that there are, sometimes that's more okay than others, or less okay than others, I should say. And obviously, I'm not advocating violence as solving a problem.
Right.
But we get to try out different things, and then I can build in consequences into the game, and the players around the table built-in consequences too.
Mm-hmm.
Had a game last week. I got a group of murder hobos, and they're uh, first they're all loners. I don't like people. I don't want to work with anybody. Oh, imagine that, four loners who got parties, four separate parties of one. But then when they face a common enemy, suddenly they're working together and they're using really good tactics,
Mm-hmm.
and strategy and teamwork to overcome obstacles. Yay! Still have to work on the murder hobo part. But a new player just came into our group, and this one guy is always offended by anything you say to him and say, "That's you questioned my honor, and now I want to fight you." And the new player is like, "Dude, really?" And he was like, he paused for a second in that, and I'm like, yes. So he's gone from just this impulsive kind of thing to now, well, wait, I'm having fun here and I don't want to mess that up. And here's somebody that's not having fun with that. I got to think about what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really cool. But then I use other games too. Maybe, uh, your kid is just learning cause and effect, and you want to try and get some engagement. And they love knocking stuff down. So you can create a game where Jenga, you're taking turns building stuff, or it's more cool if you build it higher and then knock it down. So that's working on impulse control, turn taking, engagement, reciprocity, communication, signaling, all that kind of stuff. So you can put that into an interaction, make it
Mm-hmm.
in floor time, we would call that a semi-structured activity,
Right.
as opposed to just free play where we follow the child's lead. And what do you want to do? Cool, let's do that. But now let's start to build some rules and have a framework around it and support these capacities um, in this activity that's fun, where we're safe and connected.
Yeah. Well, I think I
Murder
kept up with all. I think I kept up with all the links that you mentioned. So they should all be there. Kat, sit down. Calm down. You're fine. Fee said competitive games are the worst because people who play them are competitive, and I'm not competitive. And then the competitive people try to make me feel bad about losing, which I don't until they put me down about it. That's a good point.
You
Bye,
can
Mark.
play Pandemic with me anytime. I love cooperative games.
Yeah.
Of course, the problem is if you have an alpha player in a cooperative game, they try to take everybody's turn. Um, but that's a place where then, okay, now you're teaching advocacy for other people. So are you going to let him tell you what to do? You can still do what you want. This is your turn.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is great too. Somebody asked about murder hobos. Yeah. So in Dungeons and Dragons, you're adventurers. You go around fighting monsters. So you don't really have a home. You just
Mm-hmm.
go town to town. Whoever will pay you money to go uh, fight something. And then yeah, that's the way you solve all the problems. I'm not going to negotiate with a monster. I'm just going to kill them. They're bandits. I'm going to kill them. They're this. I'm going to kill them. So I try to create situations where, oh, you might have been able to negotiate with him, or oh, you're not going to get that now. Now the guards, the town guard or whatever, is after you because you did this instead of
Mm-hmm.
solving it in a peaceful way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. So Bite Mark has a question. Do you have good examples that can be provided for ASD, ADHD, and or anxiety being not necessarily limiters? I tend to show Clifford Stoll's TED Talk when people talk about hyperactivity being strictly a negative to learning. That's a great question.
So can I find this? I was just at the National Floortime Conference in San Francisco 2 weeks ago. I don't know. They're all running together. My structure that usually helps me stay a little bit organized has been all thrown off because of all my travel. I think I've been home like 5 days in the last 3 weeks. And I'm saying this to Stahl as I'm looking
You're fine.
through
You're totally fine.
from one of the presentations. But somebody actually put up a list, and it was written by a woman named Lisa Jo Rudy, who I think is the editor of the About Autism.com. And I took a picture of the slide. I just gotta find. Did I find it? Did I find it? Yeah. Okay. So Lisa Jo Rudy, top 10 autism attributes. No, top 10 awesome attributes of people with autism. Number 1, rarely lie. Number 2, live in the moment. Number 3, rarely judge others. Number 4, are passionate. Number 5, are not tied to social expectations. Number 6, have terrific memories. Number 7, are less materialistic. Number 8, have fewer hidden agendas. Number 9, can help others see the world more clearly. And number 10, can have an advantage in life when their special interests are applied to their career.
Yeah, I love those.
Yeah, that's just a handful of things. And actually, let me see if I can find Lisa Jo's stuff.
Yeah, those are all really good, just kind of examples of like autism being a positive. I mean, it's not a diagnosis of autism, a diagnosis of ADHD, like it's not always negative. So whenever I went through the mental health training that oh gosh, who was that? National Council of I don't know. I don't remember what it is. Who put it on? I don't remember who put it on. But they talk about the positive and negative that any mental health diagnosis comes with, and kind of the positive being the things that it adds to your life and the negative being the things that it takes away. And they were still talking about it in like a connotation of these are the things that you are losing kind of with this diagnosis and not having full access to your life. But then somebody in our class who was taking this course with us said, well, it's not always bad. There are things that I can pay super attention to the person that I'm talking to the exclusion of everything around me, and that honestly is a positive thing sometimes. So I think that's really cool.
Well, and this is a dual-edged sword for me, but I mean, when something negative, scary, sad happens, my ADHD lets me move on. I mean, I'll cycle back around to it, but I have I've got some, chronic depression issues as well too. So that comes back around. But it's like, I could be really upset, and be really mad at somebody, and then like 30 minutes later, it's like, hey, come on, let's go do something together. So yeah, that can be really good. It makes me really creative. I've worked with a group called Autism Improvise, using improv games, and my brain shifts context really easily. If I'm in a conversation with somebody, or if I'm playing with a kid, how impulsive kids jump from thing to thing to thing.
Oh yeah,
I can do that. My brain goes right with that. It's not like, oh, what happened? I don't know. So yeah, ADHD, it makes doing billing hard.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the obvious problems there, but it makes a lot of things easier. Makes me better at some things. So yeah, I don't consider that I'm suffering from ADHD.
Yeah, to me, when people say like suffering from, like, I would much rather hear someone say, I'm living with ADHD, I'm living with depression, I'm living with anxiety, because it's not always negative. There are things that any diagnosis could do something that is good. If he says, okay, I thought about it, and I think the thing I gained from developing and living with depression is that I think more closely and kindly and patiently about myself. Yeah, absolutely. No, not right now. I'm petting you over here. Chill.
Be compassionate with others and with yourself.
Yeah. Yep.
And that took me a while too. It's like I'm stupid, or I'm lazy, or why can't I just do this? And I've come to a point where if I could just do it, I would.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody wants to create problems. Nobody wants to be stressed out. So yeah, when something happens, having compassion with myself and say, you know what, I I wish that I had done things different, but I'll get another chance.
Yeah,
And what
absolutely.
can I do the next time that might help?
Yep. So, is there an overall well being strategy you would recommend to anyone with or without kind of an underlying disorder diagnosis that you would just recommend if you're going to do one thing for your well being today, tomorrow, next week? Here's what you could do.
I've been referred to as an obnoxious optimist, and I totally own that. I can be so positive sometimes that it's annoying. So how do I do that? Play. I think play is important for development, not just for kids, but for everybody. Look what you're doing right now with the kitty and stuff. That's so nice. It feels good to the kitty and feels good to you. Um, yeah, just play. Take a moment for yourself. What's something that you like? What's something that makes you feel good, that makes you feel successful? And how can you make that a part of your day, or how can you make that um, something that you can do when you're struggling, when you're down. And for me, like I said, it's making things social. If I can have a connection to somebody, because that really does help with my uh, my really lousy executive functioning.
Well, I love that recommendation to just play. I think that as adults, it's hard to recognize play as important, but I can tell you that when I take the time to just play with one of my kids, whatever it is that they're doing, whether that's a computer game with my older kids, or going and playing cars, dinosaurs, whatever he wants to play at the time, with my youngest, I always feel better after. Sometimes it's hard to convince me that it's worth my time, right, beforehand, but then afterwards it's always something that I always feel better.
Well, here's some science to back it up. Then, so NASA wanted to have highly creative engineers, right? In case like a mission in space goes bad, and if you see in Apollo 13, they had somebody who was just like really amazingly creative, was able to solve a problem in a simulation on the ground that they could give to the astronauts in space to save their lives. So NASA wanted more creative people, so they developed this test, and then came along with this bright idea: hey, what would happen if we did this with 5-year-olds? And so the 5-year-olds scored genius level on this creativity test.
I love it.
And then they thought, okay. So what if we did this with 10-year-olds? 10-year-olds, huge drop off in
Wow.
creativity from 5 years old to 10. And then they said, okay, well, let's give it to just generic, just adults, random. Let's just put it out there. And adults were horrible at it. So what they found is that they classify this as two different ways of thinking. There's convergent thinking, and convergent thinking looks for the right answer. So it says, let's take all the stuff that doesn't work and eliminate that, and then we've got the one thing that does work. That's convergent thinking. And adults are really good at convergent thinking. Divergent thinking is what they're after, though. You want somebody who's not going to be limited by, well, that's not right, or that
Right.
doesn't make sense. And 5-year-olds have no boundaries there. Like, I'll try, or I'll do anything. There is no limit on, that, well, that's not a good idea. Well, let's try it.
Yeah. It's an
Adults,
idea.
yeah, through education, our education focuses on coming up with the answer, not solving the problems, but
Right.
you know, teaching to the test, I guess. Here's how you get the answer, and not how do you solve a problem. And that's divergent thinking, and we got to get that back. That's trained out of us as we grow up, and we need it. Adults need it.
Yep, absolutely. So if you could change one thing about the mental health field, or just people's views of mental health professionals and educators, what would it be?
So if you go on YouTube and search, what if people treated physical health like mental health? Have you seen those
I
videos?
have, and I love them.
That would be it. So you see somebody with a complex fracture, they've got like a bone sticking out of their leg. Just suck it up.
Mm-hmm.
Come on, you can do it. You're not even trying. Yeah, we know that that's ridiculous, or at least we know it is around physical health. So why don't we do that around mental health? That's another big difference with floor time. Stanley Greenspan was one of the first people to think about mental health in infants, and
Wow.
children can be anxious and can be depressed. Um, and if you treat somebody who has developmental issues as if they're just being bad, the message they're going to get is that I'm not good enough, or I'm not acceptable. I have to be something different to be worthy. And that's a long term problem, with self esteem, depression, anxiety. Um, the funny thing is, the short term problem is, nobody wants a kid they're being manipulative. They're just getting away with it. They're just, tricking you. Oh, we can't have that. Well, wait, that's the problem we don't want to have. But having a kid grow up having long term, um, you know, issues with mental health, that's okay. That's a good trade off, because then,
Right, right. Mm-hmm.
I guess, yeah, those are definitely some things I would
Yeah.
change in mental
Yeah.
health.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, those videos are fantastic. They're great. It's like, "Oh, you have diabetes? Well, you don't need medicine for that. Just,
Have you
just
tried not being diabetic?
right. Have you thought about just not, whatever.
Yep.
You
My
really
opinion.
shouldn't use medicine to regulate your blood sugar.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah. Okay, so Fee says I'm seeing the issue with traditional. Oh, I'm seeing that issue with traditional education right now as a rowing coach for high school girls. So many of them are like, "How do I fix this?" And I'm like, "Try this," and they go, "Will it work?" Just try it. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The willingness to try and fail is not there. Where with my 5-year-old, he doesn't care if he fails. Like, he did a cartwheel in the middle of a soccer game this weekend. He does not care at all. Did it help him score a goal? No. Did
That's the
he?
cool thing
Did
about
he
Dungeons
try
and
it?
Dragons. Yeah, in Dungeons and Dragons, so players like, can I do this? You can try it.
Sure. Yeah.
And actually, there's a game that I like even better. This is definitely my favorite game to play right now. It's called Kids on Bikes, and essentially, you're playing Stranger Things or E.T. or Goonies,
Mm-hmm.
where it's set in the 80s or 90s, so there's no cell phones and that kind of stuff. It's kids, and the adults around them don't believe them, so they have to do things on their own. Everybody plays a kid, and then there's a power character like ET or like L in Stranger Things,
Mm-hmm.
and they share control of that power character. But the mechanic in the game that I really love is when say you're going to try and do something, you roll a die and you fail. When you fail, you get what the game calls an adversity token, and you can spend adversity tokens later as bonuses to a roll or to trigger a special ability.
Oh, that's so cool.
So for kids who have anxiety about, oh, what if I don't get it? What if I fail? Yeah, then you get this. And then
Right.
with this, you can save those up for a really epic moment later. And so I want kids to try and to roll lots of stuff, even if they fail, because then they do end up being able to have that really big, feel good, epic moment
Yeah.
and think, wait, I failed and everything was still okay. So yeah, Kids on Bikes. It's written by John Gilmore and Doug Lewandowski. Doug Lewandowski was here at the conference this week. He is an awesome guy. I love his game, and it's published by Hunter Games. Google Kids on Bikes RPG.
Yeah, it looks like it's through Renegade Game Studios.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Okay, we're going to open it up to any more Q&A. So if you have questions about autism, anxiety, ADHD, or anything mental health related, feel free to ask them. And while we're doing that, Bitemark says kids are unafraid to fail or fall or do things wrong until we teach them to be afraid. Very few keep the desire to try because think about how cool it will be if it works. Yes. Yeah.
So I forget who did this test, but there was an experiment where they had babies who had learned to crawl, and they would sit the parents down, and the parents would sit the baby down, and the baby would crawl towards, they would try to get their attention to get them to crawl across the room. So it was a checkered floor. They would start to crawl, and then after a short distance, the floor continued in transparent tiles, and the checkered tiles were actually down under that. So there was a perceived drop off.
Mm-hmm.
And when the babies got to that change, they would turn and look at their parents. If their parents smiled, they would keep going. If their parents looked scared, kids would stop.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That it's just like that eye contact with a kid who's not even all the way walking yet.
Yep.
That's great.
Back and forth emotional signaling that we love so much in floor time.
Yep, absolutely. Visual cliff. Oh, nice. That's really cool. So while we're waiting to kind of see if there's any more Q&A, Mike, if there's anything that you want to throw out there, any work that you're doing that's really cool or something we didn't cover that you want to talk about, shout outs you want to give to other organizations, websites, whatever, here's your soapbox.
Sweet. So yeah, definitely. First thing, this guy is amazing. Jack Birkenstock, I mentioned him, the Bodana Group. If therapeutic gaming is something you're interested in, definitely check him out. Check out that group. They do some amazing stuff. And hey, maybe come by the second weekend in October next year and I'll get to say hey in person. So that's one thing. Let's see. Interactions therapy. There's a group that I work with in Atlanta. They do therapeutic gaming too. And it's inner, like inside, inner actions, not inter.
Oh, okay.
Inner actions therapy.
myinteractions.com, Atlanta Social Skills Therapy. Cool.
Yep, that's them. And I work with Jennifer and Rebecca there, and they're awesome. They do therapeutic gaming. Jennifer's running the Kids on Bikes group for middle school girls.
Nice.
Let's see. Floor time, so obviously icdl.com and affectautism.com. That model, that framework, that strengths-based approach was life-changing, career-changing for me, and something I'm very passionate about. Floor Time Atlanta is a group that I work with too. They're amazing. But yeah, I guess that's it. And yeah, you guys can. I'm working on getting a new website up.
Well, when you get it up, when you get it up, just let us know, and I'll be sure to shout it out on your Twitter, which I just dropped your Twitter into the chat also. So if y'all aren't following Mike Fields already, be sure to go and do so. Here's the other one that he mentioned, that Floor Time Atlanta. And then there we go. Okay, well, if there are no other community questions, I will just say again, thank you so much for being here, Mike, and give me just a second to disconnect with you. Chat, I will be right back in just a minute. I'm going to give you the cat cam We have Yo-Yo sleeping here on the ground, so you're going to have the cat cam for a minute while I disconnect with him. Fee says, thank you, Mike. You are great. Absolutely. We appreciate you being here and being willing to come on and just talk. It's always a good thing.
Blast.
Yeah. Okay, chat. Give me just a second. I will be right back.